Welcome to Invest in Women, the podcast series, your insight into the growing wealth of women and the issues that impact their business and yours. See what happens when you educate, empower, and invest in women.
Let's face it, retirement planning can be confusing. At Jackson, we're working to make retirement clear for everyone, starting with you. Our easy-to-understand resources and user-friendly digital tools help simplify your entire experience. You can have confidence in your retirement with clarity from Jackson. Seek the clarity you deserve at jackson.com. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York. I am here with Emma Rodriguez-Ayala, who is the Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel for Ariel Investments. How are you, ma'am?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. And, one of the things, Emma, I wanted to touch upon quickly is what makes you unique as our guest is your legal background. You are an attorney, again, you're general counsel for Ariel Investments. So will you talk a little bit about how that background led to working in the financial world?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I always joke that I am an attorney because of survival and stubbornness. So I was one of those creepy kids that when they're like really little, like 5, says, I'm going to be an attorney. But that's because I'm the 4th kid in a large Latino family, and survival requires that you pick something that nobody else is when people are asking you, what are you going to be? No other attorneys in the family, like nothing. And somehow a little 5-year-old was like, I'm going to be an attorney. So of course, like my family was so like la licenciada from then on. And then once you're la licenciada, you're committed to an outcome. And so stubbornness requires that you commit. But I always joke about that because the reality is I had no idea what being a lawyer was. It's just like the thing that you say as a kid. But it did lead me through a path of, like interests and learning what it is to be an attorney. How I ended up in the investments industry was actually, if I think back, because of those interests. And what I liked the most was being creative. And I went to the University of Chicago for law school, went to one of the major law firms in Chicago, like the summer internship, thinking I would be like a corporate attorney, never a courtroom attorney. Like that's just not who I would be. And I met the investments attorneys, and this was after the long-term capital blow up and debacle.
Yeah.
And I found fascinating what they were doing because at the time there were no real rules and regulations that were real black and white for alternative assets and private assets. Of course, they were for mutual funds. And so you almost were creating and building while advising your clients. And there was a lot of gray. And so it was all like, well, does fiduciary duty require this or that? And how does it feel? And developing a gut feeling, which to me is fascinating. Because if you think of what I just said about being an attorney, you sort of wear in a path and you're like, well, I'm going to be an attorney. It's interesting. I like it. And then I really loved investments. And the financial services industry. And so much so that as my career has progressed, one of the things that I always say is my career has been me shedding more and more of being an attorney, to the point that I do usually actually introduce myself as an investments professional. And one of my expertise happens to be in the legal and compliance field and risk. Because that is how I approach my career, and it is how I approach the work that I do. I oversee here at Ariel the middle and back offices, so operations, technology, and a bunch of other areas, of course, in addition to legal and compliance and risk. And I actually really love being in those other areas. I love being an attorney as well, but I'm like, been there, done that. The lawyers are awesome and can work on their own, but I love the creativity that comes with being in investments across the spectrum of workflows. So
I love that, Emma.
I'm an attorney, but not really.
Well, I love that. I love that because I know several attorneys. I told her off air that I am friends with several courtroom attorneys. And I will say that you describing yourself as the 5-year-old that has announced she's going to be an attorney to her family is the same personality of the people that are in the courtroom saying they are going to win this case. So you could have been fine in the courtroom. I'm just saying. But I love how that led you not only to financial services. It sounds like you got a little bit of STEM stuff going on, and so I think that is just what I love about all the guests we have on the podcast is the fact that here we all have these power women who come from these different backgrounds and found their place. Sometimes, for a lot of people, there's probably been just a few that set their sights on the financial industry. It seems like a lot of people find it and then end up loving it. Now, do you think as a woman, because this podcast is geared toward women, do you think that being a woman in the financial industry, I mean, like for these other attorneys that were financial attorneys, were there a lot of women in there, or was it mostly men?
It was mostly men, and the totality of my career has been with groups that are mostly men, particularly because I grew up in the alternative space, which is, not a lot of women, particularly in the executive ranks. I think once you move into more of the traditional asset space, you do tend to get some more women, although still not as many as there should be. And so I do think there's something to be said about sort of exposing women to the industry in a different way. I think a lot of strides have been done. There's so many organizations that focus on this now. But I will speak to, I spend a lot of time in the Latina community. I of course mentor other non-Latina women, but a bulk of my time is with Latinos. Surprised at the number of still Latinos, women and men, but particularly women, who don't understand the financial services industry, and particularly the investments industry, who think of financial services as being a bank teller. Like that's the exposure they have had to it. And a lot of the work that I focus on doing is just like explaining to them the possibilities, right? Like it's like up to somebody to say if they want to do this, but if they don't know there's a path that they could follow, they just never take that first step into the path. They keep going the way they're going.
Well, and I think it's important to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. I see that in every profession, and I'm glad to see that, because that means that at least a company is trying their best to show exactly what you're talking about, which is there's a diverse group of people not only working at the company but also the people you serve. And so, talk about how that is for Ariel Investments, how that is something that's a competitive advantage for you guys.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about how we approach diversity, but I'll start just even more basic, particularly for the financial advisors out there. The world, and particularly the United States, continues to get more and more diverse. In Chicago, there actually is no majority now. The minorities are the majority. Actually, everybody sort of has a third. And the reason I mentioned that is if you are a financial advisor in Chicago and the bulk of your targeted activity to get clients, business development, is targeted to your own network and you're not diverse, that network will continue to shrink over time if you don't take steps to really expand. And so whenever I talk to financial advisors about diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm like, yeah, there's the part of it that's like a diverse team makes better decisions. We believe that that's a foundational core value here at Ariel. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But at the baseline, if you want to retire and you want to give a good life to your kids based on literally the demographics of the United States, and particularly big cities, you have to make a concerted effort to understand and learn about diverse communities. And I always say this, nobody's born with some like compliance manual on how to do DEI. And I particularly mentioned this. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, came to the US for college. I didn't know I was Latina till I got to the mainland and was told I was Latina. It was a shocker for me. I didn't understand. But I also had zero knowledge of the Latino experience in the United States, but I could educate myself. And so I always say I have extreme empathy for people who say they don't understand, they don't get it. They don't understand why DEI has to be important. They don't understand why it's treated the way. They don't understand the historical context. That was me. So I have extreme empathy for those people. I also have extreme judgment for them, because just because you don't get it doesn't mean you can't educate yourself. I educated myself, others can. And so I'll start there, because I think baselining to this is forget moral imperative. This is like a business imperative in the financial services industry. If the bulk of our assets, like, 401k assets, continue to increase materially from diverse communities, right? Putting money into 401k, those are the clients you want to be targeting. And so for us here at Ariel, we approach diversity sort of in three ways. We talk about this all the time: people, philanthropy, and purchasing. I'm happy to talk about people, though I always say this. Ariel, first Black mutual fund company, one of the largest women and diverse led companies, because our majority owner is Melody Hobson. So woman owned company. We get the blessing of having a lot of diverse talent here. They are attracted to the leadership we had. They're attracted to work in a diverse company. And I always say this: we truly are diverse. We actually do have white guys working here.
Right? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Don't leave out the white guys. Like, you
correct.
can.
We have everybody here. It really is a diverse place. And so I always start there, because anytime we talk about diversity and recruiting, people always roll their eyes. It's like, but it's Ariel. Of course, they don't have trouble recruiting minority people. So we're like, it's hard to do even here. You have to be intentional. You have to be patient in finding the right talent and in bringing them up. But I won't spend too much time on people, because we do get the eye rolls whenever we talk about bringing diversity on the people side. But for us, the other ones are philanthropy and purchasing. On the philanthropy side, I think for us, the big thing is to be intentional on what we're trying to achieve in DEI. We are seen as role models sort of for corporate America. We get asked our views on DEI all the time. And so the way you give money to the community and what you support in the community has to match what you say your values are. That is extremely critical. The disconnect that sometimes happens for companies there, where they say they are espousing DEI, but then when you look at philanthropic dollars, they're not supporting that. That creates a weird message. So intentionality in giving is important, but also intentionality of outcomes. I say sometimes people treat philanthropy in DEI as easy DEI. I'll give money to somebody who will try to achieve some DEI outcome. And if they fail, it's on them, because my job was to give money and I gave money, right? That's like the easy out of DEI. And so for us, we do that sometimes, let's be honest. Like sometimes it's like you have to sponsor whatever you have to sponsor because you're a good community leader and you just give that money where it's needed. But for some of our initiatives, we really are focused on the outcome. And, one of our big ones is Ariel Academy, which is a charter school in the south side of Chicago, where it isn't just a school. As part of the program, we teach financial literacy to elementary school kids. It's embedded.
Yay.
They
Right.
take tests. They get money that we put in. Every first grade class gets $20,000 for them to invest. They can't use it. It's to invest. And then where the money gets when they graduate, the 20,000 goes back. Actually, we just increased it, I think, to 40,000 because of our 40th anniversary. The 40,000 goes back to the next first grade class, and then the excess, because that's many years, right? The excess gets split among the students for their
That's
college funds.
incredible. So this is not just play money you're dealing with. This is real investments that you're teaching these kids.
It's like the real money. But it extends to also once a year. Actually, I think it's twice a year now. They do financial literacy for the family classes. So parents can come in and we have folks that go and teach them financial literacy because you got to tackle it at multiple places. But I mentioned that, and we have many other examples. That to me is where DEI philanthropy is outcomes based, not just the easy philanthropy. There are a lot of companies that do really good work that way, but we're particularly proud of what we do here.
I do think, and I've said this before, when speaking with or working with minority groups, it's the fact that, you have this perception of yourself. A lot of times it's your self-perception that is also an enemy for you. But I always say, look, if you take that person and make them rich, then all of a sudden there's a lot of respect. All of a sudden people have a lot of respect. So I do think money, because to me, there's a coupling of someone is judged unfairly based on their economic status or their perceived economic status. And what you're saying is outcome based. If you give them financial power, boy, things change. I mean, our country's history is full of change because of the economic power that certain groups have been able to obtain. And what I like too about this diversity and inclusion is, for some places, it's diversity and inclusion of just one group. It's not all the groups. It's not every, like diversity really means, and like you said, straight white males are an important part of this puzzle, right? It's not trying to go against them. It's just, trying to even the playing field. And so, and you're proving that. And, and I think that is probably something that could be a mentorship for other companies, because it's not just one group you're speaking to, it's everybody that needs that help.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And I actually, to your initial point on uh giving financial independence to people and how
Yeah.
critical that is, Ariel for a really long time now has been doing the annual like Black investor survey, where we look at how Black Americans invest, and not just like, rich Black Americans, but all Black Americans in their 401ks. We partner with Charles Schwab on that. It's issued annually. And what you see is a real gap in how, Black Americans invest versus how white Americans invest. But the gap isn't in the giving necessarily, or the saving the money. Like, a lot of humans are primed to save, right? It's where they put the money, how they put the money. And, the cultural differences that exist in how people think about money. And I'll talk particularly the Latino community. Latinos love like buying houses. Um and but they don't love making like investments where they give the money to somebody else. I've decided this is part of our controlling nature as Latinos. You live in the house, so you like know that the house is like good. It's a good investment. But giving money to a company, right? For them, that is a little bit harder. It feels like the money left you. Um, the other one is, Latinos are really amazing at starting their own businesses. Like, we are in the forefront of small business, but really horrible at giving capital to other people for their businesses. And again, you see the pattern. It's controlling. I'm investing in my business, in myself and my family, not in somebody else. But the reality is, if you do those patterns, you put all your eggs in one basket: your
Wow.
family, your business, your house, your money, and you really need to diversify. So a lot of both at Ariel with the Black Investor Survey and some of the work that we do in the Latino community is really looking at those cultural norms that affect how communities invest and engage with the financial services industry, to see where you can use philanthropic dollars to like change it, right? To
Mhm.
get people investing in the more traditional way that leads to what we believe is better long-term success.
When we talk about these outcomes, and I think it's just, again, I'm amazed at you helping young kids, because it's, I've told him off air, I'm a mother, and it's having to make those financial, that financial education for him at home, because I know he's not getting it anywhere else, and he's not going to get it anywhere else.
Mhm.
But one of the things that you teach people, I'm sure, and like you mentioned with that example, is it takes time. So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about patience that comes with some of these decisions about your finances.
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of Ariel's core values is active patience. It sort of permeates both how we invest, but also how we run the organization, how decisions get made. I actually like to think of it as a more PC way of saying, survival and stubborn. What I started with as what I did, how I became an attorney, uh, because it is the a real mindset that you truly believe that good outcomes take patience. It takes time. You can't act fast, but you can only ensure you will get your outcome if you are constantly and actively analyzing changing dynamics and changing conditions. And so the example I always give is, if you decide you're going to drive somewhere, you literally get on the highway and you just put cruise control and never look at anything else again. You may get there if it's like a clear, beautiful day, nothing on the road, you will get there. But a real driver has a destination, but is constantly looking at where other cars are coming. Do I need to do an exit? Do I need gas? Do I need to do this? And at the end, if something really goes bad, pivots and says, you know what? I can't do that outcome anymore. I need something else. That part is what we call the active part of active patience. And our experience has been, we're long-term investors, we're value investors. So we're contrarian, so we don't move with the masses. When there's dislocations in the market, we see opportunity, because we see opportunity. Like, they usually buy low, sell high. That is the ethos here. But even in our decision making, we spend a lot of time forcing the pause, is what we say. For before you act, force yourself to think, why am I acting now? And what new information has come in that would force me to act now? And we do act, but that challenge and analysis is actually our constant action. There, one of the things that the teams have, they'll call the devil's advocate, where an idea comes in, they're like, we will act, this is what we think we need to do. And somebody in the room is required to say no and explain why that is not the action that should be taken. Like, the person might not believe it. The person might be sitting there being like, I love this idea, but your job is to be like, this is a horrible idea. We need to stay the course. And
That's a classic debate team, right? That's a classic lawyer. I was going to say that's a classic law school thing, but it's important because we have also, as a society, kind of gotten into teams. I believe what I believe, and that's all I'm going to believe. So I think that's very healthy that you do that. Not to interrupt, but I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people and companies, and even if you're a small business, don't take the time to do.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say the lawyer. So John Rogers, our founder and CIO, his parents were both lawyers. His mother was actually one of the first women graduates from the University of Chicago Law School, and that's where his parents met. And so he always says, I like really love lawyers, but I also like really don't like lawyers because my parents were lawyers, right? So you grow up with lawyers and you like have a healthy dislike for them, is what
Right.
I've said. But that way that he approaches thinking clearly is a little legal, because that model of the devil's advocate is his vision. He always tells us, everybody in everything we do, did you turn the next page? Did you ask the next question? Or are you just acting because you're just like tired of turning pages and asking questions? And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you got enough information that everybody agrees we must act. We got enough information. We have to pivot. But that active patience comes in forcing ourselves to take a breather and decide if what we're doing is right. There.
Oh, I just love our conversation, but I appreciate you being on the podcast, Emma Rodriguez-Ayala. Now, if
Oh,
somebody
wait,
is really, yeah,
I'm
I mean,
sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean I'll stop there. Your questions. I meant I'll stop there.
no, but I'm just saying that I mean, we are running out of time. I mean, when you're having a good time, it goes by fast. And we can keep talking. I told you I'll talk to you all day. But let me do say this: if there is someone who wants more information about your company, about you, if they wanted to reach out, ask questions, is there a way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody can go to the Ariel Investments website and reach out to us there. But also, if people are interested in our business diversity views, we are always willing to meet with anybody that wants ideas. We recognize we hold a special place where our networks are truly diverse and we can create connections to people. Sometimes it would be a little bit harder for somebody that doesn't have a diverse network to do really fast. So we do put ourselves out there as available. So if anybody wants to reach out, they just can go to the website. Our comms team is always taking in those inquiries. Somebody wants to reach out to me personally, you can do so in LinkedIn. And I'm always happy to connect with people.
I will ask you another question though, Emma,
Yeah.
because I love our conversation. For female financial advisors, because again, this podcast is dedicated to them. Is there any advice you have for other women in the industry, either starting out or veterans, that you have learned through your experience that you might want to pass on to them?
Yeah, well, I'll add this. I have a female financial advisor who I've had for 15 years, and she's amazing and awesome, and I love her. And she'll stay with us forever. I often get asked like why I chose her. She is a non-diverse woman. And why did you choose to work with her? And when we were exploring different financial advisors, Wendy's her name, Wendy showed up and she came with a vision of what she was trying to accomplish with women. But also, she came with a really diverse Rolodex of vendors, right? Like, the financial advisor, when they're advising their clients, sits in a very special spot, because if you develop the right relationship, your clients are calling you for, hey, I need an attorney, right? I need I need that sort of person. Do you know somebody in this space? And the financial advisor has the ability to make connections with people. And I was impressed how, so long ago, she already had that mentality of, I want to work with women, but I'm not just going to like bring my besties. She's like, I want to curate a list of vendors that people can use that are diverse. I loved that. And it speaks to both how I have worked and also the one thing we didn't talk before about the DEI at Ariel, we call it business diversity or purchasing, which is you don't have to be diverse to look for diverse vendors, right? All of us can do something. And if you look at procurement, as some companies call it, the procurement money tends to go to construction, janitorial services, business, building management services. And what we get on our soapbox on, and we think it is critical, is to start thinking as business diversity is applying to all vendors. So you're an FA, when one of your clients reaches out and says, I need a trust and wills attorney, which is something very common to ask an FA, have you looked at what diverse attorneys there are out there in that space that you could recommend, right? You do that, you will be amazed how you start tapping into clients that are diverse. And even if they're not diverse, that share your values. And so for FAs out there, I say, that's how Wendy got me as a client, but it also, I think, has been successful in my life. That's how I've looked for vendors everywhere I've worked. And it is one of our core values here at Ariel.
Well, it reminds me of the time that my son was at the swimming pool, and and he was pointing me out to one of his new friends. Insta friends. When you're a kid, you make an Insta friend, and he was Latino, and he pointed me. I said, "Oh, well, that's my mom." And he looked at me, and then looked back to my son and said, "Well, she looks like a Karen to me." Because I know this is audio. I'm a white woman with blonde hair. And for some reason, he had already decided that something's wrong with her. So I love the fact that, again, with inclusion and everything, don't assume that people who aren't traditionally diverse aren't an advocate and aren't like wanting to further the cause of diversity, right? And at the same time, it's important to always include people from every group because they need help financially, potentially, to get their life, more powerful, in my view. Emma, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Invest in Women, the podcast series. Your insight into the growing wealth of women and how to attract and retain your female clients and help scale your practice. Learn more by subscribing to this podcast or visiting fa-mag.com.